Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Tina May. I'm the co-founder of Institute of Code, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about SEO, search engine optimization. I've got a cup of tea and I'm ready to sit in. This is going to be around a 45-minute to 1 hour workshop. We'll see how we go. And for those of you that are a little bit intimidated by SEO, maybe it's something that seems really technical or really complicated. I'm excited to debunk that a little bit and show you just how simple it can be to get your site ranking on Google. Let's dig in. Okay, first up, what is SEO? SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, and that means optimizing your website to rank highly in Google searches. So when someone types in a keyword in Google like best butcher shop in Atlanta, you want to be one of the first couple of rankings that shows up in their search results. So SEO optimization is all about optimizing your website so that we can get those elusive spots. It looks really bad when I look at myself. Okay. Why is SEO important? Now, you may have thought you could just get away with never learning SEO, never wanting to touch it, having anything to do with it, but SEO is such a valuable tool for driving traffic to your website. You can have the best website in the world, the most valuable resource, but if nobody sees that content, if nobody's reading it, what's the point? SEO, when done effectively, can become a steady flow of traffic to your website. If you do it poorly, on the other hand, you might find that even people who are specifically searching for you, people who know your business, they've seen or heard about you somewhere and they are looking for you, can't even find you when they type your name into Google. And that's a problem because as internet users, we've gotten pretty lazy. We don't like to remember domain names. We trust that we can type something into Google and we'll find the answer. So even if SEO isn't going to be a big part of your business strategy, it's still worth understanding some of the basics. Okay, over 50% of search traffic goes to the top 3 results. So when I type in learn to code and Google finds maybe 7 million responses, 50% of the people who have typed in that keyword are going to click on one of the top 3 links. Being on the second page of Google is basically useless, even though you're ranking higher than 6,900,000 other websites. You're still likely to get very little traffic if you're not on the front page, and specifically in the first couple of results. So how do search engines work? I think before we go any further, it's really important to just pause for a minute and go, how does this all work? How does this fit together in the big context? What a search engine like Google does is they crawl the internet, reading and categorizing every single website. And then they use a complex algorithm to determine which pages to rank for specific keywords. So they're reading through every single page on the internet. They're trying to interpret and understand and categorize them and say, okay, this page is about this, and it's really relevant and useful. That page is about something else, but it doesn't seem like a very high quality source, so let's push it down the rankings. Search engines are trying to categorize and index the entire web for a huge range, an unlimited range of keywords. And Google is the predominant player. We'll say Google a lot in this presentation just because it really does dominate search engines for the Western world. But depending on your market and where your customers are, you should have a look at which search engines are most popular. For example, in China, Google has a very low presence, and there's another search engine, I believe it's called Baidu, should look that up, that has the most popularity. So definitely have a look for a specific market. One of the reasons why it doesn't matter too much is that the factors that rank for each different search algorithm, for each different search engine provider are pretty similar. So while we're focusing on Google, this is relevant to Yahoo and Bing and other search engines as well. Okay, there's two sides to SEO, the technical side and the strategic side. And often when people talk to me about, can you do SEO for my website, they mean the technical side, but without first having a strategy in place, there's not much point in having technical SEO. In this lesson, we're going to look at both and how you can combine them together. Okay. SEO is not about checking some boxes. I have people ask me all the time as a web developer, can you do SEO for my website? Someone offered to do my SEO for $50 or for $100 or for $200. But SEO isn't something that's just done. It's a race against every other keyword. You don't just follow a couple of steps and then immediately land on the front page of Google. It depends which keyword you're trying to rank for. If you want to rank for best blog ever, you might be competing against all the other blogs. Whereas if you want to compete for best low-carb, diabetic-friendly chicken recipe, for example, there's likely not going to be a lot of websites creating content for that topic. So before you can know how easy or difficult it will be to rank on the first page of Google, you need to understand who you're competing against. What other websites are currently ranking for those keywords? So whenever we talk about SEO, optimizing your SEO, ranking on the first page of Google, it's never a blanket rule. It's always specific to the keywords that you are trying to rank for. And we'll keep that in mind throughout the whole workshop. SEO basically comes down to three things. Choosing a race that you can win, so understanding which keywords you are likely to rank for, creating content that your audience loves, and then optimizing that content so that you're more likely to rank in Google, so that Google understands what it's about and will present it to people. Everything we're going to talk about is going to target one of those three factors. Okay. Picking a race you can win. Before we get started with any of the technical SEO, we want to think about which keywords our business is likely to rank for. And less competitive keywords increase your chance of success. Now, it's a bit of a balancing act. We obviously don't want to have keywords that nobody's searching for, but we want to have ones that are maybe a little bit less competitive. Let's look at an example. Here are some keywords that we could be targeting for Institute of Code. We've got Learn to Code, Coding Bootcamp, Best Coding Bootcamp for Women, and as we move down this list, they get more and more specific, more niche, more focused. The ones at the bottom we would call long tail keywords, and that just means that they are more specific, more niche, more targeted, and less competitive. So at the top, Learn to Code. There are hundreds of coding bootcamps around the world. There are hundreds or thousands of blogs about learning to code. There are lots of online course providers, online apps to learn to code. And likely a lot of those providers want to rank for that keyword and are creating content around that keyword. So to rank for Learn to Code is going to be a tough race to win. We're competing against everyone else and we're trying to kind of outdo them with our content and outdo them with our SEO. Then as we go down the list, we're getting more specific. There's probably less people competing for those keywords. Coding Bootcamp, we've at least cut out the online courses and the other providers. Best Coding Bootcamp for Women, it's a little bit more specific. Coding Bootcamps in Bali, I know that when we started there were no coding bootcamps in Bali. Now there's only 2 or 3 coding bootcamps in Bali. So it's a much more specific, targeted term. Institute of Code Bali. This is when people are actually trying to search for us. They know they want to come to our school. They know they want to learn about us. That's even more specific. Reviews of Institute of Code Bali. Tina May, that's me, founder of Institute of Code. So as we get more and more specific, that content's more and more likely to rank. Now, the tendency can be to then come up with the most specific keywords ever that you know nobody else is creating content out of. But remember that even though you're more likely to rank for those keywords, you also have to make sure it's something that your audience is searching for. If nobody is searching for Tina May, co-founder of Institute of Code, which especially when we first started out the business, they weren't, then there's no point optimizing for that other than capturing those people who are specifically looking for you. Pause. Okay, number 2 on our list. Create content that your audience loves. And I say this before we get into the technical SEO because there's a tendency that when we start looking at all of these technical factors that we'll get to in a minute, we get so distracted by making sure Google loves our content and Google understands our content that we forget the actual purpose. We're creating content for our end users. We want a real human to read that content and then take action, whether we want them to buy our product or service, or we're trying to get them to become a loyal reader of our blog. There's probably some human interaction involved, and we can't sacrifice their experience for the sake of SEO. So this is more something to keep in mind. None of the other strategies will work in the long term if you're not creating content that your audience loves. So keep this as kind of your grounding rock when you're establishing all these other strategies. Okay, now we get into the juicy stuff, the part that I know a lot of you are like, hurry up, let's get to the technical SEO. How to optimize content for search engines. SEO rankings are based on a couple of factors. The purpose of the page, the purpose of the website itself, how much expertise, authority, and trustworthiness Google determines that your website has based on the creator, the person who's authoring the page, and the domain that it's shared on. The quality of the information, the amount of the information about the website and the creator, the reputation of the website, the reputation of the content creator. Those all sound pretty vague, but this is like the high level idea of what Google is looking for. At the end of the day, Google runs a multi-billion-dollar business that's based around giving you results that you want based on what you've searched. So they pour a huge amount of money into the proprietary algorithm that determines this. And we never know for certain exactly how one specific thing will affect a ranking. Google publishes some guides and gives people some idea, but of course they also keep a lot of that secret. So it's important to keep these high-level ideas in mind and go, okay, am I boosting the authority of my page? Do I have expertise? Am I a trustworthy website? Everything kind of loops back to these topics, and everything else that we'll talk about is kind of a subset or a tactic on how we achieve this. We want to be seen as trustworthy to Google. How does Google determine trustworthiness? You've probably heard or possibly heard the term on-page, off-page. We're going to start with on-page SEO, and that just means things you do on your page, on your website, in your website's code. Off-page, which we'll get to later, are things that you can do to optimize your SEO that's not part of your website itself. First factor, having a fast loading time on desktop and mobile. So Google wants to deliver really useful, relevant results. And if you click on a website that takes 15 seconds to load, you get bored and you click back, you probably haven't had a great experience. Google wants to help people avoid that. So the speed that your website takes to load is a really important factor in SEO. If you have a really slow site, and this counts for both desktop and mobile, it's going to affect your Google rankings. You also want to make your site accessible to Google. And what does that mean? Let's look at this. As a general site accessibility checklist, and I can't go over exactly how to do these because it depends on how your website is built. You want to look at whether your site has a robots.txt file. You want to look at whether you've provided a sitemap. You want to make sure that none of your pages that you actually want to rank have a no-index meta tag. A no-index meta tag is a tag that you put in the head of the HTML at the beginning of your HTML pages that says to Google, do not index this page. Now, you might think, why would anyone ever want that? But it's a really valuable tool when you're still developing your website. If you're making your about page, and this is an actual example that happened to us, we were in the process of building our about page and we hadn't finished yet. So I'd put a bunch of placeholder dummies and I'd put Houdini, our campus puppies photo and blurb in for each person. Now, I'd forgotten to put a no index meta, even though I should have known better, and somebody searched our team Institute of Code. They wanted to know who was kind of behind the brand that they were looking into. And up comes this page that has Houdini, our dog, as the founder and the co-founder and the instructor. And immediately it made a bad impression. Luckily, they messaged us and went, is this legitimate? Because I don't know what's going on. But that's a really good example of when you might want to use a no index tag. So what often happens is your developer in building your website may have used a no index tag to prevent Google from indexing your site when it wasn't ready, and they may have forgotten to take it off. So if you're having trouble with rankings, that can be something to check. And make sure you put it on those sites that you're just not quite ready to rank yet. The last thing you can do is submit your site to Google in terms of accessibility. So we said earlier that Google kind of crawls the internet. They're looking through every single web page. So at some point, they'll probably stumble upon your page anyway when it's linked to on Facebook or shared by someone or linked to from another website. But if you want to fast track that process, you can submit your site to Google and say, hey, this is a new website. I want you to index it, and they will crawl it right away. That's not a guarantee of strong rankings, but at least it gets you on the index. And I've included the link as part of the slides. Next factor, mobile friendly. So in, I want to say 2015, maybe 2016, Google pushed a new version of its algorithm that really made mobile friendliness a priority. If your website is not easily accessible on mobile, and they look for factors like, does the design adapt? Does it respond to mobile? Or is it just taking the whole website and kind of shrinking it down? If you don't have a responsive website, if your text is too small to read, if your buttons and your navigation are too small to press with a finger, all of these factors affect the mobile friendliness of your website, which is a big deal for your users since so many people now are browsing on their mobile phone. Such a high proportion of your traffic is likely coming from mobile, but it also affects your Google rankings. So if you don't have a mobile-friendly, mobile-optimized website, and don't just take it for granted that you've installed a mobile-friendly theme, actually test it, go through your website page by page, and make sure that it's as mobile-friendly as you think it is, because this is a really important factor for determining your SEO. And even if you're doing everything else well, if your site is not mobile-friendly, Google can put a big black mark next to your name and penalize your website. Here are a couple of resources. You can also just do things intuitively. You can see how quickly your website loads, but especially if you are in a really fast market. If you're somewhere where you're getting 100 megabytes a second internet download speed, you might not be able to tell just by loading your website how fast it is. Website speeds can vary dramatically around the world, and even from, say, a metropolitan area to the suburbs to somewhere more rural. So using a website speed test can give you a more accurate picture of how your website loads. So here's a couple of resources. There's lots out there. Google Mobile Friendly Test. I didn't include the URLs because ironically you can Google all of these and they'll be the first result. That's the one that I've got a screenshot of over here on the right. You put in your domain and it will tell you whether or not Google has determined that it's mobile friendly. If it's not, they'll give you some tips on exactly what you need to change. which if you understand how to code, then you can change them yourself. If not, you can talk to your developer. Google Page Speed Insights. Similar, this one is for how fast the site loads, and it will test it both on mobile and desktop. And then Pingdom Website Speed Test. That's just another website speed test. Some people prefer one over the other. It's got some really useful features where it can show you specifically what's slowing down your website. So maybe you've got a lot of really gigantic images or videos, or the order of the code in your website's not very efficient, and so that's slowing down the load time. It will give you some specific tips and tricks. You might also want to look at whether your hosting is fast. We recommend all of our students use Netlify or Cloud Cannon for their hosting because they're both very fast, reliable hosting providers. But you can check what the reliability and the speed of your hosting provider is as well if you find that your website's loading slow, but you've already addressed all the other factors that you can think of. Okay, domain authority. So this is a factor that affects your SEO, but it's not linked to one specific page. As you're creating content, as you're releasing blog posts, the cumulative ranking, the cumulative kind of SEO of each separate page adds up to be your domain authority. So Google might say, okay, HubSpot. HubSpot has an incredibly high domain authority for all topics around marketing, content marketing, SEO, etc. Google says, okay, you've been around for a long time, you have well-structured URLs and keywords, you're consistently producing high-quality content that ranks well, users are spending a lot of time, all the factors that we're going to look at for SEO impacts your domain authority. And why that's important is that if you are starting a brand new website, it's going to be a little tougher for you to get those first few pages having strong SEO. Sticking with it, having patience, continuing to publish high quality content over a period of months or even years will definitely help your SEO. It's not to say that if your website's brand new, you can't rank on Google. You can, but it is one factor that determines the rankings is how established you are. So if HubSpot produces a new article that is completely identical to one that you produce, if all of the metadata and the other factors we're going to talk about are identical, theirs is likely going to rank higher than yours just because they've already got that domain authority. So this can be intimidating when you're first starting out, but just you have to have a little bit of a long-term approach when it comes to SEO and know that it will increase over time if you're taking all the right steps. The next factor, which is a pretty important one, is the content and headings that you use on your page, making sure they're relevant to the keywords that you want to rank for. Now, when we were first starting out, SEO was not a major part of our strategy, but if you looked at one of our pages, they were definitely not optimized for any relevant keywords. Let's say we wanted to rank for coding bootcamp Bali. We didn't, and no one was probably searching for that because it didn't exist when we launched. But if we did, and you went through the first page of our website, we never even said coding bootcamp Bali. We mostly talked about web development, HTML and CSS. We called ourselves a retreat, not a bootcamp, and that was part of our branding and positioning and communicating to people that, hey, we're not your typical bootcamp environment. We've got this amazing immersive retreat environment, but there's often a bit of a push-pull or a conflict between communicating to your audience and using terms that you think are appealing in a marketing sense and using terms that are appealing in a business, in a SEO, sense. So just understanding that if you want to rank for specific keywords, you need to actually use those keywords in your headings and in your content. So if we wanted to rank for coding bootcamp Bali, we need to actually use that content in our website multiple times. Likewise, if we wanted to rank for short coding bootcamp or coding bootcamps less than 2 weeks, for example, those are things that our program does. They're benefits of our program, but unless we have content specifically about that, we're very unlikely to rank for it. To give you another example, I was hired by a hypnotherapist who wanted to know why he wasn't ranking for all of his specialties. So he was a hypnotherapist and a psychologist, and he wanted to rank for things like cognitive behavioral therapy, couples counseling, etc. But when we looked at his website, he had a one-page website, and each of those terms were only listed once. So it's pretty unlikely for Google to say, hey, this is a great resource about cognitive behavioral therapy if you've only said that phrase once, or especially if you haven't said it at all. So try to make sure that your content is really targeted and relevant for the keywords you want to rank for. And any given page is likely only going to rank for a small set of keywords. You can't rank for hundreds of different keywords with a single page because you won't be able to focus your content enough around that topic. The technical side of that is things like using keyword phrases in your page title. So every page has a title. When you search on Google, the first little bit of text that shows up for each search result, that's the page title. So you get to set that. You want to make sure that your keyword phrases are relevant, that you're using the keywords you want to search for in that title, but at the same time, it needs to be relevant for your users as well. You can't just say keyword, 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 because nobody's going to click on that. It doesn't seem useful for them. So again, we're balancing writing things in a way that's helpful to the user that we want to actually click on our result, and writing in a way that signals to Google, hey, this is what this page, this is what my content is about. You want to make sure that you're using header tags or heading tags to show the content hierarchy. So your H1, your level 1 heading, should contain what the page is about. Then you've got your H2s and your H3s, and depending on the complexity of your content, you might go down to H4s, H5s, H6s. That shows the kind of content hierarchy, the structure of your website. So maybe your topic is technical SEO, and then you have subtopics like keyword phrases, heading tags, meta description. So it's kind of giving structure to the page by using relevant headings that Google can go, oh, okay, I know what this page is about, I know what this content is about. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have an effective meta description that, again, entices readers and uses the keywords that you want to rank for. So underneath that title in the Google search preview, so when you type in a search into Google and you get your results, this will be immediately under the title. This is the description. So making sure you even have a description for every page. If you don't have one, Google will pull one of the first sentences that you use on the page. But if you've got a bit of a wordy intro, that might not be what the actual article or page is about. So I definitely recommend writing a specific meta description for every single page on your website. And this can be time consuming if you have a lot of pages, but it just needs to be done if you want to rank for SEO. The next thing you can do is use keyword phrases in image alt tags so that you can show that the images are related to the main content. Let's have a look at what that actually looks like in code. So the first one is our title. This is the page title. The next one is the meta description. So we've got a meta with a name of description and the content. So in this content part, that's where you would put what you want to display in the search preview in Google. This is an example of a well-structured heading. So instead of just saying where we are, for example, maybe saying Institute of Code Campus is a bit more relevant if that's what someone is searching. Then for one of our images, instead of having an image with a file name of, say, whatever comes straight out of your camera, EON 572316J, actually renaming all of your image tags, all of your image file names, to have relevant keywords as part of them. And then including the alt text. This is great for anyone who's using a screen reader. So really good for accessibility, for people with disabilities, also good for SEO. So the alt text describes what's in the image. So this is the Institute of Code campus in Bali, for example. I'm going to include this slide in the download for this workshop, so you can copy from there. Okay, another factor is the user experience. Google calls its user experience algorithm rank brain, and it's basically saying that how users interact with your website will affect your ongoing Google ranking. So if people spend a lot of time on your site, if they click to your website and then immediately click back, if they spend a minute on your website but then go back and search for the same thing in Google, these are all signals to Google about how valuable and relevant your content is. Maybe they bookmark it. Maybe they come back to the same link multiple times. This is something that's obviously out of your control, but worth thinking about, because the more relevant and engaging and helpful you can make your content, and that comes back to our second point of make content that your audience will love, the more interesting and engaging you can make it, the more time people will spend on it, and Google will factor that in. Okay, off-page SEO. We've covered all of the topics, all of the main things you need to do within your website code. Now let's look at some things that you can do outside of that. Inbound links. You may have heard of this one before. An inbound link is where another website links to your website or to a particular page on your website. And this is really valuable for SEO. It's a signal to Google to say, hey, all of these different websites think my content is valuable, and that's why they're linking to you. Now, importantly, it matters who is linking to you. If you have a brand new website that has no valuable content on it, that just has an article that throws a link to your website in it, that's not going to have a positive impact on your SEO. It depends on how Google ranks the website that's linking to you, determines how much of a benefit you'll get from an inbound link. So if HubSpot, which is an expert in content marketing, links to a page of mine about content marketing, that's going to have a huge improvement. If the New York Times links to an article about Institute of Code that's on our website, that's going to have a far more beneficial impact than when one of our graduates releases an article linking back to us, because they have established a strong domain authority. They've got a lot of credibility with Google, and so when they do link to my website, it has a positive impact. So you want to try and get as many as possible inbound links, but only from sites that are credible and ideally relevant. If your website is all about plumbing supplies and somebody links to your website that has a website that's all of their content is about ranking lipstick shades, for example, that's probably not going to provide as much benefit as if even a smaller website that's specialized in construction or finding retail supplies, anything even kind of related, links. So the more relevant the website is, the more relevant the content is, the more value you'll get out of inbound links. It's not really something that you can fake. There's no point just getting a bunch of people to link back to you with no context. It has to be relevant, and it has to be part of interesting, valuable content on their website. Relevant profile pages that link to your website. Now, this is something that every single business can do easily for free today to help their SEO. Both the SEO of their actual website, but also just the optimization of their business. If someone's searching for a plumber, maybe your website comes up on the second page, but on the right-hand side where it shows local businesses, if your website can show up there, that's almost just as good, maybe even better. So I would definitely recommend setting up a Google My Business or Google My Places, it's sometimes called. Set up one of those, set up Yelp, set up TripAdvisor, whatever sites are relevant to your industry. Make sure you not only have a profile, but you have a well thought out, full of content profile. So if you're a cafe, upload your menu, upload photos of your business, write a description about your cafe, include a link to your website, include a link to your other social media pages. All of this cross-linking is just a signal that, hey, this is a real business, this is a real cafe in this area. It helps Google to understand what your business is and then rank it where appropriate. Outbound links. When you create a lot of high quality content that links to other websites that are also producing high quality content, that's a sign to Google that you're kind of in the know, in the industry, you're publishing relevant content. So sharing, a lot of people are afraid to share links to other people's site, but it can actually have a really beneficial impact on your SEO, so long as the links that you are using in your content are valuable. You don't want to go linking to spam sites or really uncredible sites, because that could have a negative impact on your SEO. Internal links. This is something that HubSpot is really good at, having links between separate pages, between different parts of your content. And I'm not just talking about having, a header navigation that links to each separate page. Maybe you're doing a blog post about Instagram growth, and somewhere in that blog post you mention having an effective keyword strategy or hashtag strategy. If you link to an article that you've posted about hashtag strategy, then you're building these little internal links within your content to signal that it's all connected, it's all relevant. Of course, make sure that that's true and that it's a relevant, interesting link to your audience. You don't want to be sending people away to something completely irrelevant. But if your content is all related around a central theme, making sure that within each blog post, you're linking to at least one other blog post. And if you have a lot of different articles around a certain topic, create what they call a piece of pillar content. So HubSpot uses this a lot, and they are pioneers in content marketing and SEO. They'll create an article that says the ultimate guide to Instagram marketing, for example. And then they'll have a short introduction and maybe a checklist or a list, and say, okay, 1, get your hashtag strategy down, and they'll link to their article and hashtag strategy. 2, make sure you've got a well-written bio, and they'll link to their article on writing a bio. So that article itself is pretty short. It's only got, maybe a couple of hundred words, but it's linking out to all their other relevant pieces of content and kind of tying them together. And the latest research is showing that that's a really effective way of boosting SEO. It kind of feeds the SEO from one article to another, and boosts it overall. It's also a great way of getting people to spend more time on your website, which, as we just talked about, is another signal to Google. So it all kind of ties into itself. You make things useful and relevant to your audience, and that is a signal to Google that they should send more people to you. Social shares. Google denies officially that this is a factor, but if you look at the top ranking pages on Google, they also tend to have a lot of social shares, whether it's because of the social shares itself or just because that leads more people to spend time on the page, to send the page to their friends, to link to the page, etc. Having social shares is a great way of getting people to see your content, and it may have a positive impact on SEO. So putting your article on Pinterest, sharing your article on Facebook, having content that kind of encourages virality and makes people want to share it can only have a positive impact on your SEO. Lucky last, hot tip, do not try to trick Google into ranking your content. No matter how much you want to improve your SEO, any strategy that looks to trick the Google algorithm or rank your content higher than it naturally would is probably a bad idea. Google is a multi-billion-dollar company that specializes and that has perfected the art of giving you exactly what you want to read, what is relevant and interesting to you for your search terms. If you don't understand why Google has made it so much more successfully than Yahoo or Bing or other search engines, try searching for something in Yahoo and see how frustrating the process is. Google has perfected its algorithm and it's not going to let anything get in the way of it. And it's very unlikely that you or I are savvier than the team of engineers that's trying to prevent people from tricking or manipulating the algorithm. To give you an example, backlinks are a valuable factor in boosting your SEO. So a couple of years ago, maybe a decade ago, a decade? That's a long time. A couple of years ago, people started selling these link farms. So they would approach businesses and say, hey, I can get 1,000 links to your website for $50. And people would go, wow, backlinks are great. I'll purchase these backlinks. That's amazing. And they had a huge spike in their Google rankings because backlinks were a big factor. It did not take a lot of time for Google to figure out that these link farms, which were basically a whole bunch of dummy websites with no real content that just had links to all of these websites that were paying the company, that was not a genuine endorsement from a quality source. And not only did they undo the benefit that people had had, they actually penalized them, kind of blacklisted those sites for using what they consider a black hat technique. So any technique that seems like a way of tricking Google. Another thing that was popular a few years ago was to create a whole bunch of keyword optimized headings and then put them in white text in really small font on a white background so that even though they were there, you couldn't see them. These are things that Google can very quickly figure out. So try not to get tricked into any kind of SEO black hat technique. And anyone that says to you, hey, I can rank you on the front page of Google without asking to see your site and understand what keywords you want to rank for is lying to you. It's kind of like saying, hey, I can help you win a race against Usain Bolt without knowing what kind of athlete you are or how much you've been training or any other factor. So make sure you don't get suckered into those kind of quick term results. All right, step-by-step SEO strategy. How do we take all of that and put it into a workable strategy? The first thing I would do is make sure your site is fast, mobile friendly, and well coded. If it's not, everything else is going to be harder. Then we would brainstorm some key content topics that your audience is interested in, but that you could rank highly for. And this doesn't just have to be descriptions of your company. For us, the obvious things are like Coding Bootcamp Bali or Learn to Code in Bali. But we're going to run out of topics pretty quickly, and depending on the market you're in, that may be way too hard to try and optimize for. If you're trying to optimize for a cafe in Melbourne, and there's thousands of cafes, it might be a little bit too competitive already. What you can do then is look for either things that are even more specific. So maybe you write a blog post on the best cafe for families with small children, for example, or gluten-free vegan options in Bayside. Things that are more specific but still relate to your product. Or you can go one step further and write content that your audience is interested in, that attracts the right target market, even if it's not directly related to your product. We might write an article about how to become a digital nomad. That's something that our target market tends to be interested in. So even though it doesn't directly relate to our product, we're not just talking about ourselves, it's something that our audience is really interested in and more likely to then, come to our website, find out about us, and then read about our actual product. To give you another example, I worked with a client that had specialty crayons for children with autism. Now, most of her target audience, parents of autistic kids, didn't even know this product existed. So they weren't searching for specialty crayons for autistic kids or children with autism. So she had to figure out what they were searching for. And things like how to help my child with autism at meal times or coloring activities for autistic kids. These are things that her target audience was actively searching for. And once she got that audience on her website, then she could share information about her specific product. She's still at some point probably going to saturate the things that are directly relevant, like coloring activities, art and craft activities, hand-eye coordination, whatever. So then she can move to things that are still relevant to her target audience, even if they're not about her product. So the best family activities for kids with autism in Melbourne. It's not really about crayons, it's not about drawing, but it's attracting an audience who would potentially be interested in her product. So the first step is usually to just brainstorm. Do a big dump. Get yourself a giant slab of paper, a cup of tea, write down all of the topics. Then you need to figure out how competitive those topics are. there's a little bit of intuition of the more generic keywords like 10 things to do in Paris are likely going to be more competitive than something like Paris for wheelchair accessible, like the best wheelchair accessible places in Paris. There's a level of intuition that you kind of just can know intuitively, but there's also keyword tools that you can use that will research and tell you, estimate what the competitiveness of a keyword is, how much search traffic it's getting. Another good tactic is just to Google it, just to see who is ranking currently. You want to do that in an incognito or a private browsing window because Google actually personalizes the search results. So the results that I get will be different based on my search history, based on my location, based on what computer I'm using, whether it's a Mac or PC, and a whole bunch of other factors. So try to use an incognito browser so they can't skew the results to personalize for you, and then just search for the topics. See if the articles you find are really outdated. See if the content is relevant. See if there's, much out there that you as a reader go, yeah, this is great, or whether there's space for your content to kind of step ahead. Then create dedicated pieces of content, pages, blog posts, etc. for each of these topics, making sure you have relevant heading structures, alt tags, and that the content uses the keywords that you want to rank for. Now, Google's pretty intelligent. It will know things that are synonyms. So if you want to rank for cheap hotels in Bayside, for example, it understands the difference between cheap and affordable. It can know that big is the same as large, etc. You don't have to use all the different variations of the keyword, but do think about the terminology people will use while searching. For us, that means people aren't searching for coding retreat if they've never heard of a coding retreat before. They're probably searching for coding bootcamp. So try to use terminology within your content that's relevant, even if you then use both. So maybe you say, our coding retreat, an innovative coding bootcamp in Bali. Something that incorporates both the marketing terms that you want to use, but the relevant keywords that people are searching for. And then put effort into spreading the content. So through social media, Pinterest, direct outreach, you can message someone and say, hey, I see you did an article on this, on resources for families with autism. I've just created a really interesting blog post. I'd love for you to have a look and maybe add it to the list. Sometimes people do a bit of a quid pro quo, say, I love this article you've done. I'll share it on my website. Would you also be willing to share this on your website? So direct outreach is a really valuable strategy. It can be quite time consuming. So I typically would go through the other steps first, see whether or not you're ranking, and then evaluate, okay, how much time is this going to take me? Is it worth the effort? Because SEO at the end of the day is a really effective strategy, but it's only one strategy in your marketing arsenal. If you're more effective growing through social or growing through Pinterest, then you can evaluate, okay, how much effort do I put into SEO? And then at what point do I say, I'm happy with my rankings and I'm going to focus my energy in other places? So try not to get too caught up. Some businesses, including us, it wasn't our first marketing strategy. We did a lot of other things first. Yes, we ticked all these boxes. We had a fast, mobile-friendly, well-coded website. We made sure we had alt tags and all this other stuff, but it wasn't our primary strategy. And at first, we only ranked for keywords specific to our business. We ranked for Institute of Code Bali, for example, or Coding Bootcamp Bali, what Coding Retreat Bali, Learn to Code Bali, from my name, etc. And that's okay if that's how you want to get started. Now that you know what's involved in SEO, you can make a well thought out decision as to whether it's right for you. But I definitely recommend at least trying these basic steps. You never know how quickly you might get to that elusive top 3 first page of Google. I hope that was helpful, guys. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out through the Facebook community.